Okay, I think we're live on air now. So everybody, welcome to our fourth Hangout on Air. And we're delighted to have with us this week Michele Roberts, who is a faculty member in the Information and Computer Science Department at IUPUI. And she has been working a lot in the data big idea, and she's got some really nice things prepared for you. So I've been talking a bit about Michele's unit in past Hangouts on Air. So when that's released soon, all the videos are already prepared and ready to go. When we let that out, that'll be something you really want to see, because that's one of the more challenging topics that's been shown in CS Principles. So we also have Deepa, Jeff, Jill, and Roy with us again. And Michele, you want to start off by maybe giving us some of your insights into data in general, CS Principles in general, and how the two combine, and then we can maybe see how questions come from the class, and then stop and occasionally ask you a question.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for inviting me. I've been lurking in the Piazza site, and I've seen some of the wonderful work you all are doing and the great, rich questions you're asking. So I look forward to you being able to through the data thread after our conversation today. A little bit about me. As you can see from the little video shot there, I asked Dr. Gray to make me young and thin and blonde, but he did not allow me an avatar. As you can see, I'm older than dirt, and I've been teaching in computer science about that long. So the university where I teach is a regional campus for Purdue, and we're very proud of being part of the Boilermakers, and we are located within the School of Science. I share this with you in case you visit us in Indianapolis. You can look me up. I'll give you a little tour. But also to make sure that you kind of have a feel for the thrust of my interest over the years are coming from a department that is fully enshrined within the School of Science. Among the big ideas in the Principles course, I got to tell you, my absolute favorite is this data thread. So what I have found is it's a great time to be, probably the best time ever, to be teaching computer science. And if you've done it at all, you are excited by all the advances that are happening on the programming side. So students, we used to have to teach them how to program from the command line and how to debug without any tools. And the advent of these block editors like you've been using here with Snap, I think I have to admit that will as a computer science teacher, and certainly those things are engaging to students. But what I have found in the hundreds of years I've been doing this is that despite your best efforts to engage everyone in programming, there are some students that just don't want to program. Even if you're standing on your head and even if you're doing the coolest game ever, there are some folks who just do not feel that engagement. And the good news for the mission of the Principles class is I hope to show you in this unit how I think the data unit can be positioned to maybe some of those students that we haven't brought back to the dark side here with us with this idea of the data thread. So the first thing I wanted to do, now look, I got to warn you in advance, if you want to ask me anything, just interrupt, because I love to talk. I'll just keep talking, so jump on bandwidth and try to get something in there if you can. I want to make sure that you get a second to understand how this data unit threads with all the other big ideas. So Dr. Gray will be giving you, when he turns this unit on, you will get some PowerPoint slides. I never do more than 10 or 11 PowerPoint slides, so please look at those. And they will contain a couple of charts that I hope will be helpful. So one of the charts captures in a circular wheel and maybe Dr. Gray can at least put up in the background. You won't be able to read it because of the resolution, but you can at least get a view of its shape. And what this little wheelie diagram will show you is that, you know, here in the principles class, we have separated these big threads so that we can focus on them and study them, but there is every recognition in the principles course that these ideas are really very much coupled together. So let me just kind of walk this wheel. I know you can only vaguely see this in the background, but just so you know, it's just a little wheelie chart that has a sort of Venn diagram of sorts that just shows that there are intersections among all the ideas. All course long, you've been talking about data. That made me happy right there. But what you've done in these first units is to say, we use data abstractions to do programming. And I like to tell my students that programming is taking those abstractions and putting them in algorithmic form. So if you think about that sentence, that gives me algorithms, that gives me programming, and that gives me data. We have, hopefully you've been seeing, especially with the constructions you did with the programming assignments, you see that this is a very creative thing, and later you will be talking about the internet and global impact. Let me cycle through that again really fast that with the specifics of data. So imagine that you have an experience, whether this is real or imagined, and you abstract that experience into some data. So this data in the world we're going to be using it really stands for some kind of idea, some idea about the world. And what you would do if you were to be a data scientist is you would apply computer science principles and statistics and computer science theory and some tools to manipulate that data to draw conclusions from it. So this is the arena that you hear in the news about big data and database privacy and things like that. So I just want that we understand that data has every right to be one of those big ideas. So if hopefully we've convinced you of the righteousness of that, what exactly do we want our students to learn? What are the exiting competencies of a data unit? And Dr. Gray is going to put up another slide here that I'll just speak to real briefly. To help us get our arms around the data unit, what I did was to create a curriculum map, a roadmap to the core competencies in data from a computer science point of view. And the organizing principle, Dr. Gray, if you can just put up that table when you get a chance, that would be great. The organizing principle that I used for my roadmap is the complexity of the abstract. So I just want to say that one more time so it'll kind of allow you to kind of percolate with that idea. So think about a data abstraction, and a data abstraction can either be a singular idea, or it can be multiple ideas, or it can be multiple ideas with some processes thrown in, or it can be multiple ideas with some processes thrown in, put in motion. So let me give labels to each of those things. If we're looking at just a single data abstraction, maybe I'm looking at, I don't know, a population, and I want to think about how much they all weigh. And so the idea of weight is my abstraction. Now, in real life, the experience of weight isn't that thing of pounds. That's the abstraction. That's the measure we use to get at it. And you can see that there's some creativity here and some choices. Sometimes you don't want to look at weight. Sometimes you want to look at, BMI. So this is the idea of I have a single measure, a single data abstraction. And what kind of stuff can you do with that? Well, you can sniff around it to kind of see where, what that data says for whatever population you're exploring. So what you do when you sniff around it, these are what we call, summary kinds of counts. And there are two major measures of central tendency, how much your data is alike, and measures of dispersion. Now, I, for one, love that this principles class does not have a math requirement, but we will follow the stewardship of making sure that it's a college course that's meritorious of college credit. And by the way, don't worry if you can't see the whole slide, because what really matters is to see that on that table slide, there are columns going across that speak to a core competency that we want our students to have, exactly how that translates into a capability. What the heck would you be assessing for that competency? And then I threw in, what kind of activities do you want to do to give a fun way of chasing those ideas? So if you can just see the columns, that would be great. And the other thing that captures, even at 20,000 feet, is the table is divided in rows that speak to how complicated the abstraction is. And I start with a teeny tiny baby abstraction, just a single idea, and then I build up to more complicated abstractions. So with just a single idea, you're going to be, doing sort of summary kinds of looks. If we allow ourselves a little more complexity, we would do two things. One, we're still doing summaries, but now we're getting so fancy schmancy, we're going to do our summaries by segments. And don't tell anybody, but that's what a pivot table is. So that would allow us then to give the student capability of working pivot tables. And in your activities, you'll do some drill down on some, what I think will be some really easy and fun ways to teach using spreadsheet and pivot table kind of tools. Let's keep growing our abstraction, though. Yay for pivot tables. I don't know who said that. Roy, you're my kind of guy. I'm watching the chats here, and somebody just said, yay for pivot tables. So you and I are going to get along just fine. If I allow more complicated abstraction, so I let somebody else in the sandbox so we have more than just one attribute, now some really cool, powerful stuff happens because I can start to mine that information. Is there a relationship? Do choosy mothers really choose GIF? Who's better drivers, men or women? Well, we already know the answer to that. It's women. Who handles pain better, etc. So you can allow your students to, then to create in computer science what we call a schema. And a schema is almost grown up, barking with the big dogs, almost at the level of a model. But when we get to schemas, we're in the realm of databases. And so you can use a very focused programming language called SQL. Here's some good news. This is my kind of language. There's only one instruction in SQL. How easy is that to teach? So I'm lying a little bit, but not by a whole lot. So if you have students who, their eyes are just spinning around with data structures and control structures, here is a way to use a drag and drop GUI with logic. Show me all the zombies who haven't taken a CS principles class, a report that would return 0 students, because we're going to see here in a few minutes in my little activity, taking this class will give you immunity from one of the worst contagions in the world. So you can do some really fun stuff to go out and explore the world. This is figuring out how stuff works. So you won't have to do a marketing rant about how this is creative. This is figuring out, you know, who to figure out who likes whom on Facebook, how to predict what products should be shipped where. This is the kind of stuff the CDC does when it holds hands with Google and says, who's talking about flu stuff? Because that's where I'll ship the little bit of immunization content that I have. So I think this will allow students who might not be ready to jump into programming to start doing some of the stuff that computer science folks do. Moreover, this is a great way to get connections to other classes. Let me give you an example of what I mean. One of the things that I do is I want those students who have already checked out of math and science. The data tells us that this happens at such a depressing young age. So I want to get those students back from the dark side. In English class, I have worked with English teachers to help. One of the activities we do is I took some sample text from various authors, and folks have kind of published stats around the famous authors, and you give them a piece of text and you say, hey, do you think Shakespeare wrote this or not? In the geography classes, we actually look at maps and we can trace things that either across time or not. In archaeology and history, we can mine content for looking for relationships. In biology class, we have a little lab that says, you know, here's 2 species. Can you trace them back and connect them anywhere? So this is a great unit to make connections, not just with the other STEM classes, but back to, you know, the poets, the folks who, those voices that we also need in the principles class. So I had gotten up to the level of a schema. Let me keep going with a little more complicated an abstraction. If I take my schema, so a schema will have multiple attributes. If I take my schema and I connect those attributes with some processes, I have myself a model. So now this is just getting cooler and cooler because I can come up with a model of how the real world works, and I can go test it, and I can keep refining my model. And if I run my model, if I execute it, I can advance it in time. I can see how many people will be infected, or I can see what would happen if certain elements in my model are under some constraints. So this is what folks do when they test folks in the pharmacy industries when they're trying to see, you know, what sorts of bonding would happen at the molecular and chemical level. So I hope you can use that roadmap to kind of organize your thoughts and around the curriculum content. I gave you 2 things there on that chart. One column, one version of the chart, I'm giving you a taxonomy because I think anytime you do a deep dive into a new area, you got to pick up some words, some vocabulary. And so here's some words all in one place that as your students grow their ideas, their concepts around these key terms, you'll be able to help guide them to have ever richer conversations. if you peel off the taxonomy column, we get to the fun. So what I have done in my unit, and I look forward to hearing your ideas around how you would modify my stuff or just give me new ideas, better ideas back. I use 4 major activities in my data unit. And I got to tell you, unless the kids are lying to me, I have every indication. The classroom gets talkative. They seem on all the feedback mechanisms. My students pick this unit as the unit that they like the most. I allow them throughout the semester to bring a friend to a unit. It's a cheap marketing ploy that I do. And I wind up getting more kids sitting in the kind of activities that I do in the data unit than the other units. So let me give you an idea of some of the stuff I do. I go out of my way to not turn this into a math class, even though, now if you're a math teacher out there, don't start slapping me. I want to get those students, especially the non-technical students who somehow have decided that they can't do math, you know, they've opted out. And so I do a kinder, gentler, hopefully fun approach to this. So I made a whole bunch of little kits with shoe boxes, and I put clothespin people in them. And I run a little contest to how outrageously you can decorate the little clothespins. Now, I'm Southern, so I have to be able to take my little clothespin people in Sunday school class and not upset anybody. So, you know, you don't want them to get too crazy. But along with my little clothespin people, I give students a worksheet. I've given you copies of all this. If you want to use it, that would be great. And I will tell them one abstraction starting off. So I might say there are 10 people in your little world, and their average weight is 120 pounds. And then the students fill out a column for each of their people. And one of the rows has to be the data attribute that I give them, the one that's on weight. But they have to fill out 9 other categories, and they give them names, and they, you know, will talk to me about gender and ethnicity and occupation and favorite book and all that kind of thing. So at the beginning of a unit, unless you're teaching to a math class, if you ask the students to describe 10 little clothespin people, and you've told them the average weight is 120 pounds, they're going to tell you, at least my students always do at the beginning, that every one of those clothespin people weighs 120 pounds. The smarter students will gravitate around 120 pounds. But hardly anybody will be prepared that early in the unit to talk about skew. And so, of course, when they are allowed to pull the tape off the little box, they will find 9 little skeleton clothespin zombies and 1 really fat honkin' sumo warrior guy that skewed the data. And this is my way of giving you a real-world look at why you need to not only do measures of central tendency, but also measures of dispersion. So I have a lot of little variations on the little clothespin people, and we keep building our ideas around just some very simple descriptive statistics. So I have my students do the mean, the measure, the mean, the median, and the mode. They also calculate, when we're looking at dispersion, I have them do the range. But I draw the line at standard deviation. So I tell my students that this is where, with honor and no shame at all, they can invoke the magic fairies to come do the calculation for them. So I just talk about what standard deviation is from an idea, but that calculation, as you know, is very error prone, and if you make a mistake in step 1, it bubbles all the way through. So I don't want to lose people. So we just calculate that. So we play Who's in the Box, and they can, if they finish, if I'm doing group work and somebody finishes early, you can go ask for another box. So I have a whole bunch of little boxes kitted up, and every semester it always surprises me what students find it so much fun to go make new people for my little box. The next activity that I play is Clue. And here's how this activity works. At the beginning of the semester, I mean like the first day of class, I tell them that one of the things that we're going to be working on all semester long is a mystery. And that I've been told that one person in our class is a spy. And we're going to learn how to use logic and some computing terms and data mining to ferret out who that spy is. So I let the students create some information about themselves, and the rule is they can lie, I don't care. And I take all that information and I put it in a spreadsheet, and then I throw in my department chair. Don't rat me out, he doesn't know I did that. I throw in my dean, who does know, and so we put people's names, and then we get some clues. So I don't know, once every couple of weeks, we'll get this activity out, and we'll get a clue. The spy likes rap music, but they don't like Mexican food. And then the students will learn in a spreadsheet how to process that and keep excluding data. So I manage my data unit to map to the real world. And here's what I mean by that. If you do data science in the real world, it hardly ever works out clean. You hardly ever get a data set where it's kind of like being a parent. You hardly ever know you're doing exactly the right thing, and you have to build your comfort zone in living with ambiguity and taking, risks on a decision and assessing your confidence. And so I rig the spreadsheet every semester so that at least 2 students at the very end, if you process every clue with all the legitimate logic you can think of, you will still wind up with 2 candidates for the spy. And at the end of the semester, teams will promote who they think the spy is, and they have to do a little elevator speech, and we vote. We even throw up a campus-wide website, and folks can vote, and then we give little prizes at the end. So that's how I play Clue. Then as students keep building their skills, the other activity, so now I'm up to activity number 3. The activity that I do is that I've stolen, just shamelessly stolen, is that game Mastermind. And I don't know, I should look up who invented that game, but I promise you, it was a computer scientist. So when you are playing Mastermind, that is a model. And what you do, if you've never played that little game, there are little pegs, and these pegs have different colors. So somebody, either a partner, or there's online versions of this, and you guess. Now, you can get all crazy, but listen, I got laundry, so I don't want to do a more complicated version than just 4 positions and 4 different colors. So somebody hides this selection of colored pegs, and then you model what you think that world is, and you get feedback. 3 of your colors were right, none of them were in the right position. And then you have to keep making more guesses, and the point of the game is to guess correctly in the least number of times. This is an excellent tool for building up your logic. One of the things that drives students from programming, when their program doesn't run, or even in the planning stage of a program, the ability to reason logically such that you could make explicit your inference chain from point A to point G being able to cogently present that, these are absolutely necessary skills that will enhance, I don't care what field your students go into. So I love that little game. I stop at every yard sale looking to get yet another version of that game. So anytime my students have an extra 10 minutes, they can go play Mastermind. My last coup de grace data activity. So if you've listened to all this, hold on, there's only one more. My last activity is, I call it Catch the Fever. And the fever is the fever for CS principals. I love this class. So in Catch the Fever, there is a zombie contagion, of course there is, that is taking over the world. And I have created a database. I'm giving this to you in a zip drive. So I've created this little database, and I laced this database with all kinds of relationships. There is a relationship between getting a B or higher in CS principles and never getting infected. And there are relationships, oh, I love that. Thank you, that was a compliment. There are relationships between gender and between age and between military background and between academic standing and socioeconomic class, etc. So the students then learn some SQL, some structured query language, and they have to mine this data set to figure out who patient 0 is. And this will allow the folks, my quintessential nerds, will want to stare at the data. But the folks who maybe bring a sense of, common sense to this, they will be figuring out, hey, I'm not just going to go look at a timestamp, because in real life, not everybody goes to the doctor right away. So just because somebody has the earliest timestamp does not mean that they were patient 0. And that wrong guess can cost you, just like it would cost you in real life. So when we bubble up some relationships, we kind of have some talking about, does this make sense? And what are the gotchas? And can you see the creative side to this? Because, for example, one of the attributes is past criminal history. And this gives us a way to talk about, how do you measure that? If you get diversion, do you have a criminal history? Would you get a yes or a no? So I want students to appreciate that these are constructs. This is very much an active mental construct, and I think it captures, again, that wheel of how all these ideas are threaded together. So we have some conversation around what is it like to gather data. And in real life, it's iterative. You ask some questions, and then maybe you realize that you weren't asking the right thing, and you got to go back, and you got to scrub your data and clean it up. And don't forget, in Catch the Fever, the world is hanging in the balance, so it really matters to get this right. So we keep mining for patient 0. We need to know who patient 0 is, because you need to discriminate between multiple viral strains, so that's yet some more clues. Again, the data set is rigged so that at least 2 viral strains could be the culprit. And listen, if you get it wrong, people are going to die. So, students get really passionate about arguing one way or the other. So once they have identified patient 0, that will lead them to their viral strain. And of course, just like in real life, there's not enough resources, and we do a simulation. How fast is this going to spread? They have to make a really painful choice. And this is a class debate. And we put up, again, we let the campus kids go to a website and vote. So who are you going to save? You want to talk about global impact, you got to decide who you're going to not get the anecdote to on the first round and who you might pick up in the second or third round. And as I tell you in the materials that I share with you, sad to say, for me, I've run this simulation, I don't know, maybe 20 times. There have been 0 times where students saved college faculty. I go in the first round, but they always save K-12. So if there's any perk left in K-12, just take this to the bank. Should the zombie contagion come, my students will save you. They do every single time. So what this then allows the students to do is to work with abstractions at every single level. A single abstraction, we get at that with our little clothespin people. We do segmentation of our summary stats. That leads us to pivot tables. We throw in multiple abstractions and see if there's relationships between them. So that gets me to my spreadsheet content. And then we throw processes in there and pick up models and simulations. So for me, this is a fruitful organizing principle for positioning the students to do that final portfolio task. And you all just let me know if there's more. I have a whole bunch of more activities. I do anything I have, you're welcome. I have prepared some teacher solution sets to the zombie contagion so that, for example, some of the worksheets will say things like figure out how many folks in the zombie database are infected and have a military background. And so in those worksheets, I give you the answers so you can kind of test your understanding as you go along. If you look at the portfolio task, as it currently stands, this task asks students to get 1,000 records from somewhere. One of the things that I've shared with you are a bunch of sites that I use that my students can go get and look at that have 1,000 records in them. They also, because we put the zombie data site up on our public university website, that is officially in the public domain. And I have a lot of students. I had a couple biology students who use that to mine it for some with the work with the viral strain. So my students, like any other student in the portfolio task, have a choice of running analytics on a data set or creating an infographic on their data set. And at every step along the way, when I've looked at the data at various levels of abstraction, we did a graph of that. So we do just simple pie charts and histograms, and et cetera, when we're doing a single point of data. And then when we do our data by segmentation, we do our pivot tables. And then I spend a lot of time on infographics. I have some sites that you could go visit that, gather the coolest infographics. And I share with my students some stories from the history of science where there's all these folks who figured things out, but because they couldn't communicate their idea in a compelling and cogent way, nobody believed them. And so I think it's really important for students to figure out that final piece of communicating their results. Anyway, before I turn them loose on a pivot table, I want to see that they have acquired some competencies on how to mine a data set, how to make sure you understand, what's happening in a pivot table. It's just rotating, 2 different attributes, 1 column at a time. Back in the day, we used to have to reload our columns, and it took forever. So I don't think we want to just reduce this unit to push this button to make the font turn green or push this button to make your pivot table. You want to build them up through that curriculum roadmap so that when they get to that final assignment where they are mining a set of data to answer some questions, they can really do that in a rich and meaningful way. So my students then will either decide, most of my students will do both an infographic and a data mine. And we have had some really interesting content bubble up. So we had a student look into whether the amount of money a county spends on a child in public school relates to our state I-STEP tests. Or whether our graduation from high school is a reflection of the amount of money you spend. Really, we were all flabbergasted by the results. So then we have students look at crime patterns. Is there really a corridor of crime in our city? And they combine Google Maps and some court reporting stuff. So I had a archaeology student do a data mine around time, kind of time date stamping for artifacts. So I don't think you will have any trouble. The first time, or when I get questions from people, other teachers that I work with, they'll say, you know, my students can't find any data. Well, I'm giving you a list of a bajillion sites your students could go to, so I hope that won't be a problem anymore. Okay, I'm going to quit talking and give you guys a chance to finally jump in.
Well, thanks a lot, Michele. We're getting some really great feedback on what you've just said, and folks are really excited about getting access to your unit. So let me first apologize. We're about 5 days behind, and it's all my fault with Unit 3. So the original goal was for Michele to come on and actually talk about this after you all had done her units. But this is more of an introduction, and then we'll have those out. And some folks are really, I'm getting personal email, you're not even seeing in Piazza, about please give me these access to these resources. So I knew this was going to be a hit because last October I was in Michele's class. I had the privilege of going to her class last October when I was visiting her campus, and I was in the class, and I was wanting to play along with we were doing the zombie contagion at that time. So I saw the great way that she engages students, and I wanted to make sure that Michele had the chance to share with you her resources. So what I've found in talking with folks in CS Principles, I think the things that Michele's doing is the best work in data right now with this CS Principles curriculum. So we wanted to make sure that you all have access to that. So there's a lot of questions about data coming up from the pilot teachers, and Michele has a lot of the fun things that we can do. So I don't know, Deepa or Jeff or Jill or Roy, do you see any questions coming up that we should be asking from Piazza?
I don't see any questions, but there's lots of people, including me, are so excited to hear all these fun ideas. So we're ready to hit the thrift store and find things. And
Clothespins!
Clothespins!
Yeah, shoeboxes!
Yes.
Yeah. Nice to hear a Southern accent. Where are you from?
From Alabama.
Well,
Birmingham. Yeah.
I will just err on the side of being annoying. So the one thing I haven't given Dr. Gray yet, but I'll get him to him by next week. I'll give you my data exam and solution set. So one of the things I like to do if I'm developing curriculum is kind of get questions going along so that I can make sure my students are really prepared. One other thought about the portfolio task. The portfolio task, and when your students go out and get a 10,000 records, which by the way isn't even big enough to be a little data set, you don't want to start playing, or I don't want to start, maybe I'm just too old, but I don't want to start checking work on 1,000 records. So I do a really small, you'll get 2 data sets. One is my zombie data set, which is moving along. It's got a bunch of records. But the first little exercise I give them has just 25 records in it. You don't give students a huge honking software project to start off with. It's too hard to, you get lost in that. So the first activity is just a little worksheet that goes against 25 records where you could eyeball the data and go, you know what, I ought to get 10 back here on in my little report. Oops, I didn't. I only picked up 4. So something's wrong. So anyway, there's a small playground first, but just to return to my thought about the portfolio test, just because students have found in the public domain a record set with 1,000 records does not mean that that data set has been scrubbed or that it's in what we data folks call normalization. And when we tie this back to the scientific method, I mean, now we want this to be a rigorous class. The students need to at least comment on that when they talk about their data set and their conclusions. So a key cornerstone of a research investigation is that those results could be replicated by somebody else. And if you haven't managed your data sets with a sense to, the computer science methodology and theories that go around data, then you don't have any guarantee that that's possible. So so I guess what I'm warning you is that when I talk about the performance task, I developed a little annotated version that I let the students read. Okay, there's no let. I make the students read. That kind of speaks to what I think why, as principals, teachers, we want this, why the assignment is framed the way it does. The way it is. So I'll just throw all those resources there and use whatever's helpful.
Michele, what do you think is one of the big misconceptions that new teachers as CS principals might have for data going in? Is there something that you've heard or seen where people are struggling with or having the most difficulty that you might give a heads up to the teachers on this course so they can be looking out for that?
Yeah, 2 things. Thing number one, this class, the principal's class, is so awesome that until you've taught it all the way through once, you really don't get a sense of pacing. And you could spend the rest of your life on any one of those threads. So the first, and I'm just going to be bold and say mistake that I've seen is we get so entrenched in the programming unit that you only have 2 weeks left at the end of the semester and you feel rushed. So I think it's important to start talking about data early on. Keep reminding the students of the connections. One of the high school teachers that I work with actually had his exiting programming assignment was to write a little bit of code that would do the equivalent of what you're doing in a database. Now, for me, that would be too ambitious for the students I've had. But so anyway, watch out number 1 is leave some time for this unit because it deserves it. And thing number 2, I have seen some teachers avoid this unit because they don't feel that they are prepared to teach it. Obviously, the math teachers will be able to do this from their specific domain training, but listen, you can get really dangerous really fast with some high-level stats. The average. The ideas around data, you can teach without a math backbone. And so don't be afraid to jump in. Listen, if you can do recursion with fractals, you can do high-level summary stats. Just don't tell anybody it's stats. Teaching SQL, before there was Scratch, my introduction to programming was in a database tool, because there is this really cute high-level abstraction. In fact, I kind of make fun of my programming folks by pointing out that in databases, all of programming is turned into an abstraction, and you just get to click bubbles. Give me all the, all the zombies who flunked their CS Principles class. You just click on that. You don't have to write the programming code. The magic fairies will come and write that for you. So there really is one common formatted piece of the SQL language. Select something something from something something where some condition is met and listed in some order. They're done. That is the only line of code. So it is a way then to make a connection with programming. And I think from a teaching standpoint, it is easy to teach because you can be dangerous in such a short amount of time.
Okay. All right. There are a few more questions coming in from Piazza. They're coming in. My email, I get every post that you all put on Piazza comes to my email one by one. I'm not sure if you all have turned your digest off, but I'm getting every post in my emails, like up to 1,300 messages from all.
Oh, wow.
Not just from this, but it's overwhelming from everything else. So it's fun to see all the activity. So there was one.
I got one here. Do you give short exercises in data discernment for students early on? Yes. So when you get a chance to, when you all hit the data unit, I talk about, I like to start in the shallow end of the pool and build my students' capability as we go along. So I have a series of worksheets for each unit that grow. So there is a whole worksheet that makes you think about relationships. And a really cool thing about relationships is sometimes relationships occur when you didn't expect them. That's some of the coolest stuff in science. So I even have links to, by the way, this got discovered by mistake. It looked like just a goof up in recording the data. So I wouldn't ask students to do high-level stuff at the beginning any more than I would ask them to do, linked list at the beginning of a programming unit.
Hi, hey Michelle, this is Deepa.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question. So you said that they find questions out of data sets that are unrelated and it surprised you, and they were very cool. Do you give them as just classroom activities, or do you give them as assessments where you find them finding these unrelated data stuff?
If I'm understanding you correctly, and if I'm not, just hit me again with the question. The zombie data set that I created, and then the smaller playground that I use as a pregame, I laced it with relationships. But every semester, students have found relationships that I didn't put in there that are really there. So I think it's important to have some ability at the beginning to give feedback on, yes, you think there is a strong positive relationship. The taxonomy there is correlation. So we talk about what a correlation means, and I honestly think some of your students will be able to do the math of that, but most of my students cannot. but they can look at a scatter plot and say, yeah, I think those dots are kind of close, so yeah, I think a relationship is there. I put at least one relationship in that they will never find. And I tease them with that. So far, nobody's found it. But I'll have students come back, subsequent semesters and say, hey, was it this? Anyway, yes, I think it's important. I'll give you that activity sheet and then the solution set. So kitted up with the zip file of the zombie database is a schema that will tell you, for example, we rigged the data set so that there was a relationship with age. Young, very, very young, very, very old are the most susceptible. Military experience gives you an immunity. Medical experience gives you an immunity. And all of that is defined on what I call the teacher's guidebook. But I want, you want students to guess.
Right, but then my question very specifically is, how do you grade it? When you see what seems like an unrelated correlation, unless you understand and study the data set very well, you are not clear if it's a valid one or not. So is that something that you would expect the teachers to do when they give a similar activity in the classroom, is to look at every data set?
Here is what I do, because I run my data unit for 6 weeks, which is a full third of my semester. I do not allow multivariate analysis. So I just tell the students that I have simplified the world. And all of us, including teachers, should be able to take 2 columns and produce a scatter plot. And so the magic fairies on every spreadsheet tool I know, if you hover over that scatter plot, it will give you a strength. Now, you already know this. I heard you speak. So these correlations are going to go from -1 to 1. In my unit, I give my students a little chart that says, when you do your scatter plot, and the tool does the calculation for you, if it is between this band of numbers, interpret that as no correlation. If it's between this band of numbers, it's weak. If it's between this band of numbers, it's strong. So I would argue that a teacher should be able to just pick those 2 columns up and run it through a scatter plot. Now, if you have an advanced student that wants to talk, I just send those students off with some resources because I think you'll lose people if you let this get too complicated. Did that help? All right, getting the hands up.
Okay, I think we may need to start wrapping up, but I wanted us to say a few things. First, again, thanks to Michele for coming on and sharing all of her insight and experience with us. And you will be in the class, everyone will be seeing these 4 lessons coming up. And Michele, I know you're also enrolled in the class. I wondered if we could have you come on sometime in the future when Unit 4 is rolled out and maybe, answer a few Piazza questions at some session. Would that be
absolutely delighted.
Okay, great. So our maybe Deepa, can you help us? We need to talk a bit about our upcoming Hangouts on Air. So we'll have one on April. When I say April 4, July 7th, July 11th, and July 18th. So, Deepa, can you just say a quick word about what we're having planned for the July 7th Hangout on Air?
Okay, sure. On July 7th, which is I think a Tuesday. No, it's a Monday. It's a Monday. I'm sorry. We are having a special Hangout on Air, so that week we're having 2 Hangouts on Air. Hangouts on Air, Hangout on Airs, no, Hangouts on Air. And at 4 p.m. EDT. The Monday one is on CSTA. There is a CSTA conference coming up the Monday after that, 14th, 15th of July, and we are having the chapter liaison Frantries come up virtually and talk to us about various chapters and how chapters start and the CSTA conference. On the 16th is also an exciting National CS Principals Summit, and Google is sponsoring a virtual component of this. And we are having the virtual component organizer, Daniel Moitz, online to tell us how we can all jump on it and listen and watch to hear all the speakers speak. So looking forward to a very exciting Monday. And Jeff, would you want to take the mic over to talk about the Friday one?
Yeah, so then that Friday, with all the discussion we had earlier with recruiting, we are bringing in several folks from NC-WIT and others who have experience and expertise in how to draw more young women and those from underrepresented minorities into the course. So we'll have a whole Hangout on Air dedicated to the recruiting topic from Unit 1. We'll have that on July 11th, and then on the 18th, we can't confirm it totally yet, but we're hoping to be able to have our final Hangout on Air with code.org. And at that point, code.org will hopefully be able to tell us a bit about the things that they have set up in terms of curriculum that they're going to release publicly and some other materials that everybody in this course can use and be able to help enhance their courses. So those are some Hangouts on Air that are coming up in the future. So we've had a lot of great speakers so far and some more coming up. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm with Dan Garcia last week and Michele this week. The emotion and passion has been really inspiring to see. So we thank Michele again, and we will be getting the finals of Unit 3 out to you all, and then be looking for Michele's Unit 4. So thanks a lot, and we'll catch you on the Piazza Forum and in the class. Thank you.
Bye.